Have you ever recommended a favorite restaurant to a friend? I'm sure you have. I'm sure you have your favorite places that you're now regretting are closed for their dining rooms and you only have takeout to take advantage of them. Now, the interesting thing that happens when we share our favorite restaurants is that oftentimes we talk about something that we love and enjoy and find meaningful. We often feel really good about it. We often enjoy sharing a good recommendation about a good place to eat. Now, why isn't that experience how we feel when we share our faith as well as we share our favorite eating place? Why do we not feel that experience when we share about God's love or Christ's presence in our lives or being a part of this place, Prairie Avenue Christian Church? I know it's been often my case when I'm either preaching or teaching with you all and to you all that I'm getting as much enjoyment and satisfaction as if I was sharing a meal with you. Because when we share our faith, others are supposed to see and to follow Christ's light based on our recommendations. And now, in this day and age, it's even easier to share any thought, any feeling, any recommendation with just a click of the button. We can like something, whether by Yelp, Google, Facebook, Amazon, even Square. Every time I use my card, I get an email that says, "How do you rate your experience at the barber shop?" And in the same sense, we can also easily find anyone's review or anyone's recommendation tallied up on a website or on Yelp. In this easy to review world, why then is it still so difficult to share our faith recommendations as easily as it would be for us to share recipes or our favorite restaurant experience? Now, maybe the difficulties in sharing our faith come from a few bad reviews of Christians and churches that are pretty common. These reviews may include words like hypocritical, judgmental, irrelevant, mean-spirited, anti-intellectual, anti-science, or anti-gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender. Now, none of these words reflect Jesus nor the gospel that he preached, and not at all the churches he intended for them to act and behave. But these sadly are rather appropriate descriptions for a few Christians and even some churches, and some unfortunate experiences that people have really had when encountering a Christian. Now, these few bad reviews can be countered easily not by renouncing the total identity of Christian, but rather acting not like these few Christians and their churches. Now, Jesus' message seemed to always appeal to those who did not recommend religious affiliation whatsoever, that seemed to appeal to those who found the organized religious groups of Jesus' time and place as less than appealing places to gather or be a part of. These were people who were disconnected from God, often condemned by religious people, sinners and tax collectors, the broken, the sick, even demon-possessed. And at the end of his ministry, Jesus said and told us to continue to do the work of reaching and seeking the lost in all times and places. Now I have a question for you. How did you come to your faith? I'm sure it was through some person, maybe a family member, or perhaps a beloved Sunday school teacher, or some neighbor who just encouraged you and demonstrated God's love for you. I'd like you now to think about them and perhaps write their names, and if they are living, then consider thanking them in some way soon. Certainly the path of my faith started with someone else, with my great-grandmother sharing her faith in the Catholic parish in my hometown. I can still smell the Murphy's oil soap as she diligently washed all the pews in the sanctuary. Here's another question I ask, and probably more important. Are there people who would say right now that you have played a key part in them becoming a follower of Jesus? Which do you share more in your life? Do you share your restaurant reviews or your church events and activities? Perhaps one of the easiest audiences to start to share your faith story with is your own children or grandchildren. Now, mind you, they may also be the last who want to hear about faith. I can only imagine what Patrick thinks when growing up in a pastor's household and constantly being at the church, doing something at the church, being a part of the church. And there may be that time and place when Patrick surrenders it all and travels a distance away from the faith that has raised him since he was an infant. Perhaps your children or grandchildren are the same. Oh, mother, please. Oh, grandma, will you stop talking about that? Now, Adam Hamilton shares in the book we're studying for Lent the story of Luann. Now, Luann left the church when she was a teenager, when she was about to go to college, and she got married and had a nice family and was living a really great life without the church even crossing her mind. About that time, just after Luann became a grandmother, Luann's mother began her battle with cancer. And shortly after this diagnosis, Luann's mother wrote Luann a letter. In it, she wrote, "Luann, you have everything a person could ever hope for. A caring husband, wonderful children, and now even a grandchild, financial success, and a beautiful home. Yet the one thing that is missing is most important in life you are lacking. I long and pray for you to find a church and to walk with Christ." Now, when Luann received this letter, she was immediately angry. Here she was, already a grandmother, and still her own mother is telling her what to do and what she ought to be. But Luann didn't just throw this letter of appeal back into the trash. She kept it. And in the months that followed, and just after her mother died, she read it again. This time it touched something for her. This time it appealed to her. This time she was ready to find a church. So perhaps your child or your grandchild or your loved one may not want to hear yet again about faith now. But I encourage you to write some letter. A letter about your faith story and what it means for you that might encourage them to consider faith again as it has already helped you in your life. I perhaps have a silly question to ask you in these days where we're not meeting here in this sanctuary at all. What is Prairie Avenue Christian Church known for? Probably to the vast majority of people on 22nd Street, it's literally invisible to their minds. They drive past it 1,000 times in a year and don't even know it's a church often. Like I have said often, I don't believe that the church has a problem with negative press. I think the church has a problem with no attention whatsoever. That indifference rather than atheism is the strongest barrier to faith. Perhaps we're now known for our pumpkin patch that we had last fall, or the largest church garage in Macon County. But what leads the unchurched to take notice of us sitting here on the corner is when we embrace and our members genuinely care about other people. And when they are actively engaged in seeking to have a positive impact on our community. I can tell you from firsthand experience in Clokey Park that despite having 3 churches in the community, in the immediate neighborhood, very few neighbors probably even know what's going on down the street. These same neighbors, these unchurched, will notice when a church serves others selflessly, and when it gives generously, and when it loves radically. Not the way the world loves, but in a genuine, heartfelt, change your life sort of way. Because you see, oftentimes in the world we live in, we are caught between the world as it is and the world as it should be. And the mission of the church should be that simple, that we are not shaping the world as it is. We are not satisfied with the world as it is, but we work and our ministries focus on the gap between the world as it is and the world as it should be. Because that's what Jesus offered, a world as it should, not the world as it is. Now, while I'm here speaking a sermon to you, I'm reminded, though, that my words are not as important as they seem to be. That the most powerful sermons come from our actions more than from the words we say. So how would you answer these questions? Why are you a Christian? What do you believe as a Christian? What difference does your faith make in your life? Now, if I was asked these questions directly, why are you a Christian? It's because of heritage, no doubt. The influences of my parents who read the Bible and took me to Sunday school, the teachers, of which one of them I'm still blessed to have, one of the youngest influencers in my life, Mrs. Stroll, who was nearly 100, Mr. Romack, who was my high school Sunday school teacher, and the different ministers of First Christian Church of Beamont that carried me through when I lost my father and was a lost 15-year-old boy negotiating sudden adulthood thrust upon me by tragedy. It was in the loving relationships expressed by Evelyn Burton, who saw an 11-year-old kid as the successor for her years of service as organist. Why am I a Christian? Because there's no better way to live than I have found. And what do I believe about this story? Is that God redeems. God has always redeemed. God can't help but redeem. And what difference does my faith make in my life? I'm a better person for it. I give more generously than if I wasn't a Christian. I'm a loving husband more because I'm a Christian. I'm a devoted father more because Christ reminds me to love. I'm a better neighbor because of what Christ has done for me. I hope you can answer these questions honestly and think about them. How your witness, your testimony, your story can transform lives. Because that's what living is all about. Transforming the world from what it is into what it could and what it should be. During this time together, both in here in this building as well as in these days of online-only ministry, we've been asking the same habits, and each one of these habits involve a certain practice with our hands and our fingers. And this one is no different. Now, let's gather a hand together. Now, this hand together reminds us that we are to gather as a group and support one another and be part of the church's testimony and be part of Prairie Avenue's witness, because no one will know what goes on here unless we all are sharing the story of Prairie Avenue and the story of how Christ has transformed our lives while we have gathered here and while we have worked here and while we have ministered here. Now, the other practice is, of course, the personal one. The individual 5 fingers exercise. Now, I want these 5 fingers to represent 5 individuals. 5 individuals that you can share your faith with in the next year. These people probably do not attend church. We're not interested in stealing other sheep. Maybe some of your friends, family are spiritual but not religious. Or maybe one of these or all 5 of them are not religious or spiritual at all. Maybe they're your children or your grandchildren or your parents or your co-workers or your neighbors or your spouse or your friends. But as you think of those 5, I want you first to pray for them over the next 12 months. Either to share your faith story with them at some point during the year, or to invite them to come be your guests at Prairie Avenue one Sunday morning. Now, I want you to also do this. As I've said, I bet you probably have spent more time recommending restaurants than recommending your church. I'd like you to share your faith more online. You can do that through simple comments. You can do it through insights from the sermons or from the music. I only ask this: be thoughtful and compassionate. Don't get into judgment. And certainly do not appear hypocritical. Now, a little while back, I asked you, how did you come to your faith? And I wanted you to remember the names and places and people that influenced your faith. I'd like you to remember those that helped you develop your faith life, to know Jesus or to deepen your faith. I want you to stop and thank God for each one of them, because the gospel is always traveling through from one place to another and was passing its way through when it got to you. And after you remember those who carried the gospel to you, I want you to then ask God to use you. So that one day, who knows what day that will be, one day your name will be recalled by someone, maybe years from now, as one of those people, one of those persons who shared their faith when they needed it. Blessings to you as you share not only Prairie Avenue with others, but share even more importantly the gospel of Jesus Christ, the good news of God's redemption story with all you meet. Amen.